Okay, so today I'm going to be going over what HWBOT is, how HWBOT points work, how to join a HWBOT team, and how to see your HWBOT profile, as well as how to sub for HWBOT. Starting with what is HWBOT, for those that don't know, HWBOT is a place for PC enthusiasts, overclockers, and extremists. I'll use that word because that's what part of HWBOT is. HWBOT is a collaboration of all of these users together. We come here and submit our points, and our points get us trophies and medals, and we do it out of, well, fun, I guess. There is an important note to make. You don't need to be an overclocker to submit for HWBOT. If you want to really get into competing with some other people and seeing who can get the best score in different benchmarks, then yeah, you might need an overclock. However, if you're, say, submitting scores for an older processor or GPU, something that there's not many scores for already, then you might get number one just based on there's not that many scores. And if you outperform the few people that did submit for that certain set of hardware, then hey, you might get up there without overclocking at all. Okay, the next topic I want to go over is how HWBOT points work, and I've had to record this a few times because it's a complicated topic, at least for me to explain. HWBOT points are divided into, from my understanding, global points and hardware points. Global points, again, from my understanding, are the points that you get from submitting a certain set of hardware that beats other people's hardware. So for example, if we go to submissions, let's see here, processor submissions, and go down to, I don't know, say Cinebench R15, you'll see that here are my submissions, all the submissions I have done for Cinebench R15. And to go further into that, before we go any further on that subtopic, there is, to get to your HWBOT profile, just simply go to hwbot.org, then you click my profile right here once you have logged in. Then you will go down to my submissions, and you can go to processor, motherboard, video card, memory, whatever submission you want. Filter processor benchmarks, or whatever benchmark, you can filter through that and say, I want to see all the scores I have submitted for Cinebench R15, or whatever benchmark it may be. You just scroll through, you pick whatever benchmark you want to see your scores for, and if you don't have any scores, obviously none will be there when you go to it. Like I shouldn't have any scores for this, so there's none there. But I want to see Cinebench R15. That's what I'm interested in right now. So here I did, looks like, chilled 10980XE overclocking for Cinebench R15. This is one of the benchmarks I ran and submitted the score I got on it. If we click the score I got and go further into that to see my detailed review of that score, as soon as that loads up, you'll see that it puts me in a different ranking position. World rank 250th out of 4,951. Global 18x CPU rank. The way they do this is they divide the CPU into how many cores it has. So for this instance, it's 18x CPU rank for this benchmark, that is. You can see I got 77th out of 144. And then Core i9 1080XE rank, what that means is your whatever piece of hardware you submit it for, that'll change here. So if you submitted a 7700K, then hey, that'll say Core, i7 7700K there instead of 10980XE. And you can see that I got 20th out of 23rd for this benchmark with the 10980XE. So then going into the points, which is the topic of this little part of the video here, is, well, there's the categories you see here. World record points, I would guess that's for if you break a world record with your submission, I would assume. You have your global points, that's the one I was saying, if you, submit a certain piece of like hardware and it scores really good or it does really well, then you'll get those global points. From my understanding, the hardware points you will always get. From what I understand, I know I'm saying here from what I understand a lot, and that's because, again, the point system is a little bit complicated. But the hardware points, you will always get hardware points, and this is why you can submit for HWBOT even if you're not overclocking. If you submit a certain piece of hardware, you might only get 1.7 points for it or 1 point for it, but hey, that's a point. And you're getting that point because you're submitting that benchmark, that said benchmark, with that said piece of hardware. So you'll always get hardware not hardware points, no matter like what hardware you're using, pretty much. Those will always come through for you, even if you're not getting global points or any kind of world record points or anything like that. So now I wanted to talk about the team. So to get to your team, you just go up here and click My Team. If you haven't joined already, this is the unofficial Newegg HWBOT team profile. To join this, I believe you would just go to this link, and then somewhere here it would give you an option if you're not in a team already, and it may even still give you the option if you are in a team to join this team. It should be somewhere up here to the side, and you have to request to join. And once you request to join, the captain would be Forks. He would go and accept that, or notice that you joined the team, and then bam, you're in Team WEG's HWBOT team. Once that happens, any benchmark that you submit will be considered kind of on behalf of the Newegg HWBOT team, because now you're submitting kind of like for that team because you joined that team. So for instance, I'm here on this team. Here's me, Bryce Games. This is all the contribution total that I've submitted to this team. 1,539.40 points. What that means is that's the total points added up. So that's the user points. That's like my global and hardware points combined is what I believe user points are. And you could see I have 248.00. Then there's my TPP, which is the team power points. These are the points you get for submitting certain benchmarks scores based on what other people in your team have submitted, and also just for submitting for that team. So if you submit a really good score that would say beat someone else on your team, then you're going to get those team power points, and it's going to add up. I don't want to go too detailed into the points because I don't have that good of an understanding on them, and again, they are a bit complicated, and I don't want to give any kind of incorrect information, and I may already have given some incorrect information on the point system. Okay, going back to how to see your HWBOT profile, go up here, click My Profile. There's something I want to talk about here, and that is for the first 3 months when you make your HWBOT account. I believe it's 3 months. You will be considered a rookie. During that time is your opportunity to get as high as you can before you get placed into another league. Speaking of leagues, I will go to those leagues right now. Okay, so here are the leagues, the rankings, or as you could call them. Starting out at the very bottom is the rookies. That's again, when you first make your HWBOT account, you will be placed into the rookie league for 3 months, unless that has changed. That I don't know about, but I believe it's still 3 months for rookie. After that, you'll be placed into one of the other leagues. Now, if you submit a benchmark that, say, you specify you cooled your processor or GPU with chilled air, and I'll go over how you can specify that right after this topic here, you'll be placed into one of these Apprentice Extreme Elite leagues. These are the leagues that are, well, the more exotic cooling leagues. And that's something that personally happened to me. I was in the rookie league, then I did some chilled 1090XE benching, or subbing for HWBOT, and as soon as I subbed those chilled water benchmarks, I immediately got placed into the Apprentice League, because now HWBOT's like, hey, you're doing this, that's going to make it unfair for the other rookies who aren't using that, exotic cooling method, I would guess. And then I got placed into the Apprentice League for that, which isn't a problem, I'm not complaining. But you could see the different leagues here: Elite, Extreme, Apprentice, Enthusiast, Novice, and Rookie. You can read for yourself, pause the video, read for yourself what those different leagues and rankings are. Okay, now it's time for how to sub for HWBOT. This is a really important topic, probably the main topic of this video for all the Newegg and other team people and just new people to HWBOT in general that want to know this. To sub for HWBOT, you just log into your profile on HWBOT.org. You go to submit score. It's going to pull up this screen here, and now you'll see that there's a whole bunch of stuff going on here. At first, this is going to be complicated, but after you do it a few times, it will get simpler. You will learn it. And starting off, well, there's all the processor benchmarks. These are every single benchmark that you can submit to HardwareBot is going to be listed here. You can scroll down and see all these different benchmarks that you can submit scores for. Then you have your video card benchmarks. This again is, there's a lot of these. For 3D Mark, for instance, some of these little square cubicles have sub-cubicles that you can go in, and you can see that 3D Mark has not only just the one 3D Mark bench, but there's all of these that are considered 3D Mark that you can submit scores for. So there's a lot of stuff you can submit scores for with HardwareBot. Then there's the motherboard benchmarks. I personally never use any of those. Memory, same thing, never really use any of those personally. Disk, never really use any of those. Competitions, probably some fun stuff, haven't done any of that either. But what I have done is video benchmarks and a lot of processor benchmarks. So now going into detail of how do you run these benchmarks? Well, so next going into the topic of so the next topic is how do you run these benchmarks? Well, if you want to know for a specific benchmark, say PyFast for instance, we would look up PyFast in this bar here, and you'll see that it comes up with the tab benchmark. Click on that, and now we have PyFast. Now, how do you sub for this? Well, you click on rules. It'll bring you to this page here, and it's going to show you how to do it. It's going to say the allowed versions, the allowed operating systems, the benchmark settings to use, all of this. Most of the stuff you would leave to just default. Now, the verification screenshot, this one's important. If you click on the verification screenshot, it's going to show you the windows that you should have open. The red windows are your mandatory windows. You have to include those on your screen. You cannot have any windows overlapping, or at least some benchmarks you can. For instance, the benchmarks you would run with Benchmate, which I'll show you in a second, but others you can't. In general, for HardwareBot submitting, it's not good to have windows overlapping. It just doesn't look good. So it's best to just space them out like they have them here, where nothing's overlapping. So red, you have your mandatory, and then your green, you have your optional, as in you can add it in there just for extra, little perk of having it, but you don't have to for it to be a valid submission. Okay, so what's a good tool for HardwareBot? Well, there is a really good tool for HardwareBot, and that is Benchmate. I've used this a lot. Benchmate.org is the site here. You go to Big Bundle, download that. Location 1 or 2 doesn't matter. That'll download here in the bottom, and when this is done, I'll go over how to use Benchmate. Okay, so once Benchmate is downloaded, you'll go and you'll run this Benchmate big 7-zip extractor file here, and that's going to run. It's going to take a little bit, and after it runs for a little bit, you'll notice in your downloads folder or wherever you have it set, it'll come up with this, Benchmate 0.10.5. You can move that straight to your desktop or make a shortcut to it to your desktop, or however you want, however you feel most comfortable. Open that folder up, you're going to go to Benchmate, you're going to double click on Benchmate, it's going to X to allow it to make changes to devices, click yes, let that run. You're going to see that it's validating system timers, let it do its thing. 90%, it's going to initialize hardware info. It'll take a second to do this, and once it's done, you'll notice that that little shield has that green, or that white check mark with the green shield behind it. Okay, so now once in Benchmate, you're going to see that there's all of these benchmarks that come included in Benchmate. So what you'll want to do is, for example, if you're doing a processor benchmark, say Cinebench R15. I've used that as a reference a few times in this video. It's a really good reference point. Let it open, accept these little license things. You're going to see now that Cinebench R15 is open, and it says that it's guarded by Benchmate. What that means is this benchmark, whatever score you get, has been guarded and confirmed that it couldn't have been cheated because it's the guarded by Benchmate application. Of course, that doesn't mean the score can't be cheated, but as long as you're submitting with correct CPU-Z, Windows open in the background, then it shouldn't be a problem. And again, just to reiterate how to find out what correct CPU-Z windows you need to have open, you would just go, say, here to benchmarks, or search up Cinebench R15 here in the search bar, or whatever benchmark you're using. You would go to that benchmark. Once this loads up here, then once on the benchmark, you would just click on those rules again. It'll open that window and you'll see that here are the rules for Cinebench R15. So hey, for this benchmark, what are my rules? Okay, so the rules here are, the first rule is this window here, this little score, the CPU score window, as well as the rendering window, is showing that it can't be covered for this benchmark. The CPU-Z window on the CPU tab needs to be open. The CPU-Z window on the mainboard tab doesn't need to be open, but it's optional to have it open. So for me, I always like to include the optional windows as well, just to be super safe. And the CPU-Z memory window needs to be open. So let's get out of this. Let's go ahead and we'll close this out. We'll run our Cinebench R15 benchmark. Okay, so hey, look at that. There's my score. I got in Cinebench R15 a 3,633. So now how to verify this? Well, we're gonna go here to CPU-Z. We're gonna open it 3 times. Usually CPU-Z will have a, do you want to allow this to make changes to this computer? In that case, you can just simply click or press on the keys Alt and then Y, hold those both down at the same time, and it'll automatically hit yes for you when that option comes up if you're doing this without Benchmate. It's a good little tip. Once they're opening, you're seeing that I'm moving them by default. I'm not even thinking about doing this. I'm moving them on the sides of this window, and you know, you don't have to make it neat like this, but I always do. CPU tab here. Then the next one is the mainboard tab here, and this one's now open, so I want to go to the memory tab here, and I want to align these up something like this. So since we're using the guarded by Benchmate option, we're going to go here to save result in Benchmate. We're going to click that, and you'll see that it says to take screenshot, press F5. So let's go ahead and do that. Make sure you don't cover this Benchmate window that goes here, so you want to have your stuff more towards this side of the screen, if possible. On a 1080p monitor, this may be a little bit more difficult as things will be more compact and closed in, but if you need to, you can always set a virtual resolution and that'll make it a little bit easier. So now you see that we have our Cinebench R15 scores, 36,033. Or not, yeah, 3,633 is our score for Cinebench R15. Now, how do you submit this score? Well, since we're using Benchmate, you would go to Submit to HWBOT, you would enter your username here, and you would enter your password there. You can click Remember if you want. I recommend doing this, that way you can quickly go and submit multiple benchmarks at once. And that is how you submit using Benchmate. Now I want to talk about if you're not using Benchmate. This is when things are a little bit more difficult, because Benchmate will do most of the work for you when you're using it. But if, say, you're using Cinebench R15, and this is another good point, is that you can submit Cinebench R11.5, R15, and R20 as individual benchmarks without Benchmate. So technically you can submit them twice. You could submit them once using the Benchmate application, and then again using just itself. And I'll show you how to submit just itself right now. So we get a Cinebench R15. You would normally have this installed somewhere on your desktop here. I'll have links to all these things in the description below. We'll open Cinebench R15. We'll see it opens here. And then what we want to do is pretty much the same thing. You would run this, and then once it finishes running, you would need to go and open CPU-Z. So that's something else that you would probably have installed somewhere here on your desktop that would already be installed. But for me, I'm just going to go into the Benchmate folder just like I did for R15, and I'm going to find it here because Benchmate stores all these applications for you. Here we see CPU-Z. We're going to open this 3 times. Close that out. Let CPU-Z open. We have our CPU window, and just imagine there's a rendered picture here. We've got our mainboard window, and then we've got our memory window, because for this benchmark, that is the required tabs that it wants you to show. Then what you're going to do for Windows 10, that is hit Windows and print screen. However, And by print screen, I do mean the key on your keyboard that says PRTSC, print screen. However, if that's not an option, you can type, and this is on Windows 7 as well, SN. You can go to your snipping tool. You can hit new. If you don't want to do it with print screen, you can drag and do that, and that works as a screenshot too. Go to File, Save As, wherever you want to put it. I'll put mine in Downloads, HWBOT video. Put that in there, and now we can go and see that I've got the screenshot that I'm going to submit to HWBOT showing my completed photo that was rendered using Cinebench R15, the CPU tab, the mainboard tab, and the memory tab, which is all the required windows for this submission. So then how do you submit? You go back to HWBOT, go to Submit Score. If I am going too fast, please feel free to slow the video down and rewatch, go over, and pick up anything that you missed. Now, also just so you know, while I find the Cinebench R15 benchmark here, rewatching via just scrolling back doesn't give me another view. I'm just saying that to help you, trust me. It has nothing to do with views, as I do not have 1,000 subscribers on my channel, which means I get no money from these videos, just as an FYI. Alright, so now we go and we see that there's Cinebench right here. We're going to go to R15, because that's the benchmark we ran. It's going to load. Okay, so it's asking for a benchmark score, so I don't remember, but I'm going to go to my screenshot and say I didn't run it here, but when I did run it, I got a 3,633, right? So I do remember. So you would enter that score. I'm not actually going to submit this because, you know, obviously I don't have an actual score here in my screenshot, but usually you would, and normally there would be a number here, and you would put that number on your benchmark score. Then it's saying hardware. It says use XTU profile to identify, populate fields by previous submission, and enter hardware manually. If you're doing multiple of these with the same or similar hardware, multiple benchmarks that is, you can actually do pre-populate fields by previous submission, but usually I just go to enter hardware manually. So for me, I'm using a 10980XE. You would just enter your CPU with whatever you're using. And it's running at stock. So since it's running at stock, I don't need to put the megahertz it's at. But if you weren't at stock and it was overclocked, you would type how many megahertz that is. So if you're running at 5 gigahertz, that's 5,000 megahertz. Or 4.9 gigahertz, that's 4,900 megahertz. So then it's saying select cooling. So if you're using an AIO, go to AIO water. Using air stock cooler, go to air stock. If you're using an air custom cooler, then I believe there's an option for air custom, which there is. Whatever cooling you're using, go to that. And then of course if you're using anything exotic, those are here as well, such as dry ice and water / chilled / cold, etc. You can add some additional information if you want, and that is something I recommend doing. But you don't need to. That's all you really need is the processor, the megahertz it's running on. If stock, you don't need to populate this field, remember that. And the cooling method. Next is the video card. You would just simply type your video card. For me right now, I'm on a 1660 Ti. So bam, 1660 Ti. It says what cooling is it on? Well, it's on air stock. I'm not doing anything crazy with it. For the video card, you really don't need to populate these fields. You can if you want, but you don't need to. Motherboard. It's asking what motherboard I'm on. Well, I'm on an X299. Oh, manufacturer. Sorry, this is asking for manufacturer. Manufacturer of my board is Asus. So you would type whatever it is. For me, it's Asus, and the manufacturer. Model is X299. See, not pulling the model up there. So I'll try another version. Let's see here. Okay, here we go. So now it's popping it up. Now I typed X299. As you can see, if it doesn't work, just backspace it and try typing it again, and it should pop this little option menu up. For me, I'm on the ROG Strix X299E Gaming, so I'll put that in. On cooling, well, it's on air stock because I don't have anything crazy done with it. Memory, you don't really need to worry about too much. However, I do recommend that you would fill this, but you don't have to. And discs, again, don't really have to fill that. Same thing with power supply. Now, a verification screenshot, you would go to choose your file. Mine's is in the downloads, HWBOT video, that's the name of my screenshot. I would put that there. If, for instance, you're doing a 3D mark bench, you would need, and that's a video card benchmark, you would need to add your compare URL here. So how do you get that? Well, you would go to 3dmark.com if you're doing it for 3D Mark. If it's another benchmark and it has its own site, then you would go to that site and find your score, your benchmark score, and then take your little link from up here and put that in. But for a lot of them, like the Cinebench ones, R15, R20, etc., there won't be this. But for 3D Mark, you would go to your results, and it's going to ask you to log in. So I'm going to type my email. Okay, it's not letting me log in at the moment, but that's just a personal problem with me. But normally you would go to your results. It's saying I don't have any results because I had to log in with Google. It's acting crazy right now. And once you go to your results, there would be results here. And you would go to whatever benchmark you ran, click it, and it'll bring you to the page of your score, and you would just copy that link, and then you would put that link in your submission URL. But for I don't need to do it for this, because remember, this is an R15 submission that I'm showing here as an example. Okay, so then it says pictures of your system. We're just working our way down. You don't have to add a comment here, by the way. You can if you want, but you don't have to. Pictures of your system. For this, you would add, say, take a picture of your computer if you want to. You don't have to. And add that in here just as an extra little piece of information on, the area and what you're using to submit the, the score, what the picture of the exterior of your hardware looks like. Once you do that, if you want to do that, then you would go to I have read and agreed to the rules for Cinebench R15, and then you would click submit benchmark result. And once that happens, you could go to your profile or your team, and you'll see that that benchmark or that submission is now added onto your profile. And you would go to your submissions, and you could see that here via whatever benchmark you ran. Okay, as a conclusion to this kind of probably long video, I have 5 Ds. The 5 Ds of HWBOT, as I'm going to call it. And that goes in this order. Number 1, do double check every HWBOT submission rules before you submit. So if you want to do a certain benchmark and submit for HWBOT, go to HWBOT, look up the benchmark, go to the rules of it, as I showed in previous sections of the video, and see what rules and what the screenshot should look like and what versions you should be running on. Go and double check that right quick before you submit. That way none of the HWBOT mods and admins have to go and modify and or delete your submission for inaccurate information and or score result. Next, don't overlap windows. I don't care if you're, say, using Benchmate to do the submission. I personally have gotten into the practice, and this is something I've learned with HWBOT, of never overlapping windows. Just get in the practice. If you can't fit the windows on your screen, then go and set a virtual resolution. For me, I'm on NVIDIA, so I would go here and I would go to change resolution, customize, and set a custom one. Some monitors won't support this, and if it doesn't work, then you'll notice it'll probably do that black screen, or it'll act like flickering colors or something like that, and that's because the monitor probably doesn't support the resolution, and it may not work for some people. But for most, your monitor and your computer should allow you to set a virtual resolution of, say, 1440p, or something that's a little bit bigger than 1080 or 720p for doing some of these HWBOT submissions. Number 3, do have fun and be honest. Never make HWBOT work. What I mean by this is something Forks, one of the mods from the Newegg server, told me, is that, hey, HWBOT's not work, it's made to be fun. If you wake up one day and you're like, man, I just really don't feel like submitting for HWBOT today, then don't. You don't have to. There's nothing requiring you to. It shouldn't be work. It shouldn't feel like work. However, if you do wake up one day and you're like, hey man, I really want to do some HWBOT submission stuff today, then hell yeah, go and do some HWBOT submission stuff. and have fun with it. Number 4, don't intentionally cheat or try to bend hardware bot submission rules. Mods will take your post down. Your account will probably get like marked or like restricted or like whatever they do once you like do it intentionally so many times. However the hardware bot mods like to handle their business. I personally have never got any marks, I don't think, or at least none that I know of. I don't really know what happens when you do, but just don't push the luck and try it, because it probably won't end well. Number 5, do try to add as much information to your submission as you can. So, what do I mean by this? And that's add those extra, you know, the multiplier of your CPU and the megahertz it's running at, and just a little extra tidbits of information. For me, extra stuff is not only that, but also adding like little fun photos and stuff onto your benchmark submissions. So I think R11, one of these I submitted some photos with. Let's see if I can find that here right quick. Here we go. You can see here the little picture, the little camera icon shows I have a photo added on this benchmark submission. And here it is, media gallery. This is a little extra tidbit of information that I included that I thought would be cool to add. I was doing the chilled water, the AIO liquid chilled, and I showed the ice bucket with the radiator in it and everything, and I just added a little photo on the submission, and that's something that you can do because some people might find some of this interesting. So, anyhow, this video is already long enough. I'm going to end it here. That's the basics of how HardwareBot works, how to submit for HardwareBot, how to do all that stuff with HardwareBot. I'll try and put as many links to all of the stuff I talked about in the description below, such as the HardwareBot website, Benchmate, some of the benchmarks like the one I demonstrated here in this video, R15. And yeah, let me know what you guys think in the comments below. If you have any questions at all about HardwareBot, please feel free to drop a comment and I will answer that because I read all comments. Thanks for watching. See you guys in the next video.